Welcome, and thank you all for coming here today. Today we're going to talk about the multi-vendor Open RAN project that we've recently announced. And as part of today's discussion, I have three individuals here with me today from Mavenir, WWT, and HPE. First, let me start off with a question to you, Dave, from WWT. As a systems integrator, you sit in a unique position in the industry. From your perspective, can you tell us from a CSP's point of view, what is the value of this multi-vendor Open RAN solution that we've all been working on and the value that would bring to CSPs?
Right, so this has been an area that the industry has been struggling with for many years to look and open up the RAN space. And other technologies such as voice over IP, video over IP, and even IP in itself, there's been incredible openness in those particular systems and enabled incredible new markets, cost compression, and new areas to go into. Within the RAN space, there's typically been a proprietary solution with a few different vendors in that area. And there's been a need in the industry, or a desire in the industry, to open that up to offer further competition, further innovation, and further cost competitiveness in that particular area. So this has been an endeavor that's gone on for several years, and we're in the cusp of actually bringing that area to market. And one of the things that we've outlined is it's been rather tough due to the integration and delivery of those particular systems. Not just that you can actually build it out, but how do you maintain and support it over time in a cost-effective manner. And that's where we've come together here to actually put that in a solution we call the multi-vendor Open RAN as a reference architecture to enable the industry to actually accelerate in that area.
Great, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I think we want to double click on, and that is the integration work. Can you tell us a little bit more detail about the partnership and what it means, specifically to testing and pre-validating these integrated solutions?
Right. So we've done a lot of work, actually paper studies, and then actually hardware and then software integration studies in this particular area. It's actually been very interesting to look through that you can deploy and put together a single system with Open RAN, but it's another thing to actually deploy it and then maintain it over time. So what we've been able to do is look at integrating that system in a lab and then looking with the different vendors here, represented here, to actually build out a delivery system and an expectation of a common set of milestones in delivery and testing and integration systems that are efficient and able to be delivered and consumed by the market in a reasonable manner. What we've found in other disaggregated solutions is without a consortium like this and not everybody rowing in the same direction, if one vendor gets out of line, it's incredibly costly and the OpEx on the particular system grows up very, very high. So by pulling this together, we're able to put together a thoughtful solution that meets the requirements over time for the customer and be able to deliver a very high quality, long-lasting system, which is beyond the normal 3-year system that we see. We're looking at 6, 8, and 10-year lifetime into the field.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Ani, next question is for you from Mavenir. Can you tell us what are the tenets of an Open RAN solution and what's important to CSPs?
I'll draw an analogy, if I may, and use 2 different sectors to illustrate my example. If you look at telecoms over the last 3 to 4 decades, telecoms has essentially published a new G every 10 years. That's because telecoms has been very prescriptive in terms of standards. So it takes us in the telecom industry every 10 years to actually publish or go from 2G to 3G to 4G and eventually to 5G and beyond. Why is that? Because there's an overemphasis sometimes, if I may say so, on being extremely prescriptive on interfaces and how network functions operate, how hardware interacts with software, so on and so forth. That's been the traditional way of building networks. In my mind, the IT sector, on the other hand, has valued the evolution of different parts of the stack at different, let's say, speeds. The underlying hardware industry in IT has had its own pace of evolution. The, let's say, intermediate software, the operating systems have had their own releases and their own innovation cycles. And the IT industry has been able to pretty much release applications on top of all of this on basically a daily basis. And that has to some extent been prescriptive within those layers, but it's allowed the IT industry to progress at a much faster innovation pace. Not every 10th year, unlike telecoms, historically. That has also come with a certain amount of cost, and that cost is basically what's made systems integration a core component of the IT industry. Now, if you were to marry both of these, as we build the next generation of networks, we want the resilience and the vertical integration and the comfort and the proven stability and the rigidity, the ruggedness of telecoms with the fluidity, flexibility, scalability, and pace of change and innovations from IT, and marry that too into a completely new whole and completely new animal. And that's basically what we are trying to achieve here today. That being said, I think the industry can only grow if folks like us come together and tell our service provider customers that, yes, we bring to you the value of choice, but to just take the perceived risk of system integration efforts, the perceived risk of multi-vendor away from the table to actually prove that stuff works. So I think this is the biggest proof point, which we have actually demonstrated in real live environments and production environments. We have published a framework, which is not just talk, it's real stuff, it's real products, it's real services. And I think it goes a long way, I think, in lowering the barriers of entry to wider adoption of virtualization, wider adoption of cloud principles in radio access. I know a long-winded statement, but hopefully it got the point across.
Great, thanks, Ani. And I do like the concept of giving our customers choice, and that's what we're here to do today, is ensure choice, and more importantly, ensure that our solutions are tested and validated. So my next question, as a great follow-on to you again, Ani, we've been working together as partners for many years now, and we validated your vRAN solution on top of VMware's Telco Cloud platform for RAN. Can you tell me the value and the importance that means to you and your organization that we're pre-tested and validated?
Excellent question. And for us, capabilities that mitigate concerns on the customer side are paramount. Capabilities that a partner brings to the table in terms of enabling a faster pace of innovation is also equally important. I think why the collaboration with VMware specifically has been very interesting is some of the concerns or considerations that our customers have is when we get into virtualization, how can we ensure security? The second concern that they have is how do we implement and ensure in-service SLAs and uptime? The third is how do we dramatically change through automation principles the speed at which a network is deployed? And last but not the least, how do we manage the whole life cycle of the entire network management piece? So I think what was critical for us with VMware as a partner is we have been able to demonstrate this in live production and live commercial environments. I'll not get into a huge back history, but proofs in the pudding. So today, one of our largest customer for a national North American 5G rollout is Dish Networks. They're a very valued customer to a lot of us here. And we are rolling out 500 sites a day.
Wow.
And that itself is proof positive that stuff like this works. A service provider would not take in our Open RAN software or a cloud platform that wasn't secure, wasn't scalable, couldn't drive true CI/CD principles, and which would not allow them to manage the entire life cycle of technology evolution. So it's been great.
Excellent, and thank you for that, and thank you for your partnership. Dave, next question for you. Can you explain to the audience here today why VMware for WWT?
Right. So we've had several engagements with VMware around service provider implementations with several tier ones in Europe and the United States. It's turned out very, very well in the output. We've been able to pull together multiple disparate systems onto the common VMware platform, actually with HPE as well. And we've actually been asked by some of these operators to continue to develop that particular system. So we work customer driven. So we work with VMware and HPE in this area as well as Mavenir based on the requests of the customers. And we've had very good outcomes based on that particular solution. So, and we continue to look forward to further innovating and delivering around that, Rob. So, yeah.
Excellent. So the next question, JC, let me turn to you now. Could you tell us, from an HP perspective, Open RAN solutions typically have been designed to run on, commodity off-the-shelf hardware, but sometimes having value add in carrier-grade specific hardware can bring value both to our solution together as a collective, but also what's the value to CSPs?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The HPE is the leading vendor of servers in the infrastructure space for telco by a large factor. And so we're very committed to the innovation in that industry. And when the Open RAN initiative started to blur, we felt very committed and engaged into it. So we cannot only bring existing servers to Annie and Dave and say, well, go ahead and do it with that. We need to meet requirements of customers which are pretty specific in the Open RAN area. So we've designed a series of products that are form factor optimized for that space, which come and support this partnership. All along with some special features in it in terms of NEPS compliance, temperature resistance, fire resistance, optimization at a networking level also, with all sorts of acceleration capabilities that we're bringing. And we're bringing that to the partnership for the whole ecosystem to adopt those techniques and be successful as it transitions to the monolithic appliance RAN environment to the Open RAN concept.
Excellent. Thanks, JC, and we appreciate your partnership. And I think the value that you do bring with these dedicated hardware platforms designed specifically for this market and this industry, and your experience, done this over the many, many, many years that you've been in that market. I think there is value with hardware platforms from HPE like yourselves versus true commodity off-the-shelf platforms, because telco is not like a standard IT workload.
Oh, by
sure.
far not. Yeah.
Sure. So now a question for everyone here. As we look at the O-RAN industry and we look at its adoption, right, 2023, 2024, if we go back a couple of years, we had expected that the market would have moved faster, but unfortunately it hasn't. So to all of you, and maybe Dave, I'll let you go first, can you share some common comments about what you think is required for the Open RAN approaches and this ecosystem of partnerships to work and help drive value for CSPs, and why we're all here doing this?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the core tenets of this multi-vendor consortium that we've put together, and the capabilities that HPE has been able to come to the table on, being able to give us not only a great platform, but also supporting that for that 6 to 8 years that vendors require. And then Ani's come in here with the Mavenir capability with world-leading software and innovation onto that system, open interfaces and the right KPI and other functions that operators are looking for. And then VMware, like yourself, has come in there and built this solid platform and be able to customize that system, make sure it's cost effective and delivered, and the stability that's required into this market. And then really, it's the ability for us to all talk together and have a common understanding about what's required versus coming in there and just coming into a customer and having the customer kind of trying to figure this out. We're putting this together, we're putting a construct together that allows for not only for just the testing certification that we talked about, but it's also the delivery of the system. We're thoughtful about that, about the radios, the cost elements that are involved there, and then most importantly, the long-term maintenance and support that a lot of other folks don't really look at. So we've actually put together a framework that says we're all going to work together, we're going to stay together on this particular system, we're going to make sure that we deliver consistently over that 6, 8, 10-year time frame, and we're going to give the experience to the customer that they're looking for and that they're used to. We really have to be cognizant of that in this particular area, because that is the single biggest issue that's occurred in other areas where it's just focused in on the test and certification up front, but as soon as it gets operational, it's not able to turn up fast enough. It's not able to maintain fast enough, or the reliability is not there, or it has to be swapped out in 3 years due to end-of-life issues. And I think that's what we're dealing with here, so we can actually have a consistent, capable implementation into the industry. And the industry needs this. I mean, each of the operators out there, their OpEx is growing, and their CapEx continues to grow. because consumers love cell phones. It's growing by 30% per year for capacity, but ARPU's dropping. So something has to give, and this is where 70% of the spend in operators is on RAN. And I think this approach is really going to allow operators to be competitive, be innovative, and get to that next billion users that we all want to go to and get more of this capability into the field.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
JC, same question to you.
I think it took a bit longer than expected. I agree, but I think it comes from the fact that our customers, service providers, are willing to get one thing, which is optimization. Optimization across the stack, right? Yeah. From software to infrastructure to services. They want to have an experience that mimics that of an appliance. And if you look at an appliance, it's really built for one thing, right? And so with all different bits and pieces, we have to optimize, regrouping them so that it gets competitive against that and get even better. And that took time, I think, from an industry perspective, right? Perhaps we're not done yet, maybe not. But I think we've reached a point where we are really close. And so we can really now engage with customers with solid confidence on the vendor side that we're here for long term, with something that is really optimized, fit for purpose, and that leverages all the innovation that the IT brings, which was not the case before.
Great. Thanks, JC. And Ani, last but not least, same question to you. What can we all do to help the Open RAN ecosystem accelerate and drive adoption into the CSPs?
I think the pace of adoption has been slower than what we hoped it would be. But I've been in the industry for more than 2.5 decades. I sound like an old man, but it has, however, unfortunately, the pace of adoption has been somewhat what I personally expected. The radio access side of the business is a hard business. It's also, if you look at it from the service provider side, when virtualization first started to creep in or seep in into the core network space, the initial discussions with our customers, the service providers, I was with an incumbent vendor in those days, was all about reducing vendor dependence, broadening the supply chain, and driving down prices. That was fundamentally the wrong discussion and wrong topic. Eventually, competition decides market prices. Prices usually have one way of going, which is down. Products and networks become efficient. The real conversation that should have been had, which would have sped up the adoption of virtualization in the core, was what does this bring to us in terms of network resilience, flexibility, fluidity, scaling, and lowering the cost per bit. That realization came to us in the industry and took us about 6, 7, 8 years of time. It was a more natural progression on the core network side. It lends itself more to IT principles than the radio access side. Because try as you might, you can't really virtualize or put on the cloud the actual radiating unit, which is a physical piece of hardware, which is very volume dependent. So I think, however, the one encouraging sign that things have picked up is this push for Open RAN is essentially two constructs. One is the virtualization of the intelligence in the radio access mechanism. And the second is to cut that little proprietary cord between the actual radiating hardware and that intelligence. The first step has actually gone better than I expected. If you look on the traditional vendor side of things, all 2 or 3, if you count all 3, have committed to working on virtualized RAN environments to what they call cloud RAN. I mean, whichever way you want to, whatever you want to call it. It's still the fact that they are putting efforts behind virtualizing the baseband. And that's a powerful statement and a good measure of progress. Some of our competitors have actually even committed to put some of these capabilities onto public clouds. That's a dramatic step forward. Now, as a smaller company, do we welcome the competition? Who likes competition? Is it good for the industry? Does it grow the industry for all of us? Absolutely. The one part which I think will take a while for folks to understand why it's a tough ask is that last piece of Open RAN is actually cutting the cord between the cloudified element of the baseband and the hardware side. I think where we need help, not just as a consortium, because you guys are more on the cloudification side, we as a Mavenir need help is in order for us to deliver on the true promise of a multi-vendor, vendor agnostic, more choice radio access network, is to optimize costs on the radio hardware side. There is no way in the near term where a company our size will be able to compete with companies that do hundreds of thousands, if not millions of radio units and hardware units in a year. We need to take some forward calls. We need the support of partners that we are working with today, like Qualcomm, like Intel. Not just that, manufacturing partners like Jabil, chipset and SOC providers, companies like HP and Dell when we start to look at baseband on site, to really help us take a forward-looking call on volume-based pricing on the hardware element as well. I think when that happens is when these two happy marriages come together, the whole hardware development on the one side and the cloud virtualization on the other, and that will really take off. I think the march of technology and progress is inevitable. Intuitively, all service providers recognize it and embrace it. It usually starts with the wrong principles in mind, which is usually if I introduce these folks into the network, I can drive prices down with my incumbents by 15%, is the wrong conversation to have. It really should be, am I building a network that's resilient, that looks forward to the future and drives the true ITification of the entire telecoms industry.
Great. Well, thank you, Ani, and thank all of you for being here today. I really appreciate your time coming here to talk about the multi-vendor Open RAN solution that we've put together. And thank you, and have a great rest of the show.